Okay, we are on Finding Your HR Advocacy Voice with Tracy Justice, and we have Christopher Schrader with us. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. So it is 4 o'clock on the dot. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. But before we do that, of course, I always want to put out the disclaimer, right? Before we get into conversations, right? Because especially in this day and age, we have so many people that are saying, I don't want to be political. I don't want to be political. And we definitely don't want to come off as we're being political as well. However, I mean, well, Chris, you can add a tweak to that because it's really not about being political, but it's really about being informed. And we just want to ensure that, we're creating a community where, we can be informed, ask questions, and figure out what does advocacy look like for you, right? Because advocacy is something that everybody should have a part in. But everybody is going to look different from everyone. So today we have quite a few things that we're going to talk about. But before I maybe I'll start with that list. So we're going to look at some of the HR policy briefings that comes through the SHRM email. Are you okay with that, Chris?
Absolutely.
Yes, because what I see that happens is that we get these emails, but sometimes there isn't a space to really kind of check in with those things and say, hey, what do each of these different things mean? So we'll do that, and then we're going to jump into the presidential election, right? Mm-hmm. Like and how that impacts HR policies. Because whether we want to, believe it or not, or agree to it or not, it really does impact it, right, Chris?
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure.
Yep. For sure. So the first one that I wanted to bring up, okay, I'm going to share with everyone just because, it's just me. I'm having technical difficulties right now. And so I had, so I need to look for that because I just realized I don't have it all memorized. I had the newsletter I was going to pop up. So the first one that I was going to talk about, I think I kind of remember that one, is about the New York is SHRM had to send in an amicus brief to the NYCHRL. Right. Okay. And so they sent in because it looks like there was a case. I guess this is a well-known case. It was the plaintiff is Wendy Williams' husband, Wendy Williams from New York, the TV show host. And she, so once they had a divorce, her husband was served papers. He was the executive director for the organization that he worked with her. After she filed for her their divorce, then a few days later, they also fired him. They released him from the organization. And so what it looks like is that the NYCHRL, and once I pull that up, I'll have the full acronym, what that means. But it looks like what they want to do is change the meaning of marital status to not be, whether you're married, single, or divorced. They want to change it to where it really matters about who the spouse is. So, Chris.
Who the spouse is.
So
I don't understand the distinction.
Okay, so then let me pull that up. Okay. Yeah, so let me pull that up real quick. So what are we doing? Yeah, go ahead. What's coming?
No, I was just going to say, well, the interesting thing is with that was that one of the key underpinnings in the court decision and why the Obergefell case, gay marriage case, Supreme Court case, was so important is because as to HR, marital status matters a lot because that goes into the eligibility for health insurance, life insurance, disability insurance, all these other things, right? And so that's not a trivial matter. Marital status is not a trivial matter to HR at all when it comes to the benefits side of the equation and who's eligible to receive which benefits and under which circumstances and all this other stuff. So that's a big deal. So was Williams arguing that he's not the spouse? I mean, because if they're getting divorced, he must have been the spouse. I don't get it.
So here's what and let me see if I can make the screen bigger.
I can't read.
Yeah, because it is small, and I know, and it's one of my pet peeves too. Whenever someone shares, it's just like, come on, let's make sure that everybody can read that. Okay, right. So here,
hang on a second. Right there will be good. Okay. So the case is in the appellate court. Okay, this makes sense.
Okay, and I know I wanted to have it up for you. Okay.
So which will decide whether marital status should include includes a person who is married to rather than just the state of being single. I am not understanding that distinction.
So so of course I did reach out to Google.
Oh, wait a minute here. I see what SHRM. Okay, so SHRM's saying here the employers have legitimate non-discriminatory reasons to manage workplace issues following the dissolution of a marriage. Corrects, such as enforcing anti-nepotism to prevent conflicts of interest, etc. Right. So the broad interpretation can undermine those policies. So I guess what it is so this is in the appellate court. Okay. So what I need to understand was what was the original finding?
The original.
Okay, so here we go. So involving and a unique interpretation of this. Oh, the NYCHRL. So that is the human rights law.
Okay, the human rights law.
Okay, so New York City has its own overlay.
Okay.
Human rights law, which is kind of different than the typical overlay you see of civil rights, right? So the amicus brief. Okay. So what did, scroll down, let me see what the interpretation was.
Now it didn't provide, but maybe you can glean from that.
No, it did. I'm not familiar with the case.
Okay, so
I don't understand. Well, first of all, because to me, marital status seems to be a binary element. Either you are or you aren't.
That's right.
As a matter of law, because let's face it, when you get married and you sign off on, you get the marriage license, you get the whole 9 yards. Now, whether or not you go through religious ceremony to be married within a certain religion, in the concept of being married within that religion, that in itself doesn't create the legal status. The legal status is created when the state recognizes that you are married, right?
Yes.
And so whoever performs a ceremony and signs off on that is therefore then acting as an agent of the state.
Okay.
Right. So oftentimes it's a dual thing. So with the state, like state of Indiana,
yes,
grants almost any recognized minister if you're a recognized minister and you've been granted the authority to create a state of marriage, like I was married in the Catholic Church, my priest signed off on that license, and in that state, the state was recognizing him as having the authority to act in locus, right, of the state to be able to go ahead and do that, and that is what made it legally binding. Okay, so my priest's interest was that we were married within the church, which is completely separate from the state's interest, was that we be married in the eyes of the state. And then once that happened, that created the legal status of matrimony, which then acted as a trigger for everything else. So whether that person can be bound on the debts of the other and eligibility for insurance and all these other things, right? So that is a state. And so what this is suggesting to me here is that somehow the NYCL sliced that in some way. That, again, I don't understand. It's binary, either are or you aren't. So I can't fathom what they could have done to.
Thank you for that, Chris. Because I think I read this.
I can completely understand why SHRM would file an amicus brief, because that creates absolute chaos. If there can be some netherworld where in between the legal interpretation of matrimonial state and then there's something else where that isn't there, and then that has an impact on rights and privileges. So I can completely understand against that backdrop why SHRM would say, no, you can't slice at that thing.
And it's funny because what I was reading, because I did use ChatGPT. I'm going to put it out there. I use ChatGPT to help me make sense of this.
They're right about 90% of the time on the law. It isn't perfect, but okay. All right.
And so what they were saying, in other words, Hunter's interpretation implies that discrimination could occur based on the identity of a person's spouse, not just on whether someone is married, single, or divorced. So that's what they want they want to imply that discrimination could occur based on the identity of a person's spouse, not just on whether, the person is married, single, or divorced.
But the individual once again, Obergefell is the. We already have a Supreme Court case on this. I, honest to goodness, don't understand why they're trying to crack open this can of worms.
Really? Okay.
In the Obergefell decision, Justice Kennedy, who wrote for the majority, specifically wrote in that an individual's identity is protected, and he lashed it to the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. Okay. So that is an Obergefell, and that is a Supreme Court decision, and that is the law of the land. This is why Title VII, Civil Rights Act was modified to take into account identity being protected, right? Why we see all these identity issues, particularly around a person's self-perception of who they are, right?
Yes.
And so this all came out of the Obergefell decision. So once again, I do not know where are they trying to shoehorn. It seems to me they're trying to shoehorn something in or add to Obergefell somehow. And I'm not a lawyer, so maybe it would take a lawyer to understand this super fine distinction that I'm not grasping, but I can forget that. I can easily see why SHRM filed the amicus brief. So let's get into, instead of getting in the weeds on this thing, let's talk about what an amicus brief is.
Yes, let's do that.
So because it is indeed a component of advocacy. Okay.
Yes.
So amicus briefs can be filed by parties who are not directly related to the parties who are engaged in the legal fight, right? So this case before the court in the second court does not directly involve SHRM at all. SHRM is not a litigant in it. SHRM is not a charged party in it. We're not named, nothing. Okay. So, and you see these most commonly at the appellate court level and at the Supreme Court level. So amicus briefs filed at the Supreme Court are a dime a dozen, right? Because the Supreme Court is going to decide this matter one way or the other, either narrowly or broadly. And so all these amicus briefs are being filed for the court to read, because this is people saying, hey, we're not a litigant in this, but we have a frog in this race. We have an interest in this. And so SHRM is articulating that interest and in essence saying to the court, here's our point. This is why you should pay attention to it, right? Yes. So that is indeed a form of advocacy. So SHRM does this. SHRM has a lawyer on staff.
Okay.
And
okay, you're answering.
Although sometimes SHRM will also engage, particularly a law firm, especially a law firm's got a lawyer who specializes in this sort of thing. So sometimes SHRM will engage a lawyer on it, but SHRM does indeed have its own lawyers. Who would be expected to write these amicus briefs.
Okay.
Right.
So
now that's something that a member would not do. Now, if a member was a lawyer and had a client and wanted to do that sort of thing, they certainly could. But that's not something like that a chapter would do, for instance, or a state council would do. Okay. Now, maybe, some of the large state councils like New York or California that have the resources to pay for more things.
For somebody to do that.
Smaller states such as Indiana does, right? So
now, is there something similar that, like, let's say there's for the introverts out there, right? That might be like, well, I know I should go down and provide a public comment on this particular law that they're
this isn't something they would ever do, right?
Okay. So then could people, could HR professionals come together and write something and send it in to, for public comment?
So, well, the baseline answer is yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, but there's a specific legal structure that an amicus brief must follow.
Okay.
So it would have to follow those, because otherwise the court isn't going to consider it, right?
Oh, okay. So there's a process or procedure.
You're going to be doing cites and things like that. So it's extraordinarily difficult for a non-lawyer to do. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm not.
But it's a lot because I did look. I clicked.
It's a lot. I am telling you that I personally would not tackle that.
Well, yeah, because I clicked on it just to kind of look at the template and just kind of have an understanding of what it
No,
looks
but
like.
I'm glad you brought
lot
it up because we haven't talked on this program about that component of advocacy. Okay.
Yes.
But you're typically going to see that. That is something that a national organization is typically going to be involved in because simply the resource commitment it takes to create the brief.
It's just a lot.
In the first place, right? In the first place. But I will say, at the appellate level and at the Supreme Court level, super common, super common. And given the lower court, giving the lower court decision in that case, I'm totally unsurprised that that SHRM would file an amicus brief on that. That's in my point of view, whatever they've done there is just bad law.
Really, and and I thought it was really interesting because I think when I think about advocacy, I'm really on this this advocacy and what it really looks like because it seems like a lot of people are just always afraid of what advocacy is, and I guess I just want to clarify some of that.
Well, it takes many forms. The point is, it takes many forms. Now, we have on this program tend to focus on the form that involves the HR professional advocating on their own, but on the behalf of the profession, right?
Yes.
And we've always come at it down the angle, which I always do, which is education, because I have said many times before, I'm not a lobbyist. As a matter of fact, I'm not confident there's anyone who's registered as a lobbyist in any state. We don't lobby. We don't.
Oh, you mean us? Yes.
Us. Yeah. Yes. HR IndySHRM does not lobby. I don't lobby. No one associated with the chamber lobbies or any chapter lobbies. We do not endorse. We do not have a PAC. We don't give money. So we do none of those things. So the form that our advocacy typically takes, I believe, takes the form of education.
Yes.
So we say, for instance, if this bill passed as it is written, I do this all the time. So if you pass this just as it's written, here are all the problems that are going to manifest because here's where Title VII is, or here's where this is. And this is usually what typically happens. 9 times out of 10, laws are being written and they're not coordinated. Nobody sits down and says, oh, by the way, let's square it with all these things. Yes. And so usually that's the form that the advocacy is taking. Please shape this legislation differently.
Yes.
So we can actually work with it.
Yes.
Right. We would rather it said this than that, or these other things. And that's most common at the state level. At the federal level, they do tend to hash that stuff out. That stuff does tend to be caught by lawyers or committee staff members or things like that. And so it's more along the lines of we would like to see the bill do this. Now, for instance, when I was in DC last time, now this is going to come again, right? Because we already know that the court in Texas struck down the FTC's proposed ban.
Yes.
Non-compete agreements, right? So now this is going to throw the ball right back into the court of Congress, and Congress has 2 bills, one in the House and one in the Senate that address those sort of things. And I had been arguing for, I just think it's incorrect to throw out the baby with the bathwater. From an HR standpoint, non-compete agreements have their place. And that is strictly, that is a labor rule. It's one of the tools in our toolkit. Now, should it be deployed capriciously? I think so. But on the other hand, once you let companies use these things, they are free to use them, right?
Yes.
And so from my standpoint, once again, you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater just because you're afraid that some people misapply it. I'd rather see a better application of how they're used, and that involves education. And
that's right.
Maybe lawyers giving advice and things like this, but you don't want to take that away. And I had been explaining, the negative impact that would have. So now I wasn't making much headway, right? I wasn't able to get either bill shaped in that fashion. But that doesn't mean I didn't.
And why do you think, why do you think it's kind of a struggle to get that shaped? What do you think it's stopping the
well, it's bipartisan.
Mm-hmm.
So that's harder.
Okay.
There's a lot not to like about non-compete agreements when you just think about them structurally.
Yeah, but I think you helped me understand the use of it as a tool, because I think we've had,
because originally when we started talking about, you hated him too, and and I was able to demonstrate to you why they're not inherently bad.
Yes.
I will say this, courts don't like them because they see it as a restraint of trade, the right of an individual at a very baseline level to make a living as they so choose, and yes, it's absolutely a restraint.
It could be.
It's an absolute restraint. And the Republicans don't like it for very similar reasons, right? The Democrats don't like them primarily because when you think of how the legislation came about, this all came about because of what Jimmy John's was doing. So you're familiar with Jimmy John's, the sandwich people. So they were basically having all of their employees. I mean, and I'm talking about the people making the freaking sandwiches. They were having all of their employees from CEO on down were signing these non-competes and basically telling these employees that, hey, if you leave Jimmy John's for any reason, because remember, non-competes do not pay any attention to whether you were terminated or voluntarily resigned. It doesn't matter. They survive for a period of time, which is always identified in the non-compete, right? They're not forever documents, right?
Like 2 years usually.
There's always specified for a period of time, right? And they were basically telling these sandwich makers, listen, if you lose your job here, you quit, you can't go to work at McDonald's or
so ridiculous. But
and of course in the state of Indiana, those would be utterly unenforceable. I mean, just utterly unenforceable as written. A judge would just tear them apart because in Indiana we're a blue pencil state and judges can do that. But
and
that's
blue pencil being just, I know we said it, but real quick, blue pencil is that
blue pencil means that's where a judge literally takes a blue pencil out and crosses out the parts of the non-compete that they don't agree with, and then they hand that back to the two parties and say this is what's enforceable.
Yes,
just whatever left. So think about it as like it's an editing tool. And it's done on a judge basis. I mean, a personal judge basis, how they feel about it, right?
I wonder why it's blue pencil. Why blue?
I don't know.
Okay, maybe
I'm sure the reason I don't.
That time and then and now.
I don't know. I just know Indiana's a blue pencil state on that stuff. So anyway, I assume it had something to do. Well, red probably meant something and black meant something else. Would be my guess.
That's true. That's why I figured it probably meant something back then. But
I'm sure. Sure there's a very material reason for that. But at any rate, the point is they were doing this, and so for the Democrats, if you're going after somebody making minimum wage, I mean, you just deserve you deserve to have it taken away from you. So anytime you get the Democrats and Republicans agreeing in principle on the same thing, which hardly ever happens anymore, it's bound to go. And so anytime you're in there trying to say a yes, but right. And I have been asked by congressional offices and federal offices, Senate offices. So wait a minute. So if people were actually allowed to write, if we kept non-competes, they could write non-competes for the wrong reason. And they could absolutely hand them to an employee. An employee could sign them as a term and condition of employment. And that non-compete, although not enforceable the way they wrote it, if the employee believed it was enforceable and therefore they didn't apply for jobs they could otherwise get, that could actually harm that person that way. And my answer to that was absolutely correct analysis.
Yes.
That's 100% true.
Yes.
So,
but why do you think they did that though?
Pardon me?
Why do you think, because I know that, that was the question. HR, was HR involved in that process? I guess that was something that I wanted. Did they have an HR department?
Jimmy John, sure. Yeah.
Huh.
And they made the decision to do it. Now, I believe that was a wrong decision, but as I've said many times, if basically we intend to punish people for bad management decisions or poor judgment, we're seriously underbuilt on prisons. I mean, really, that's where we're going to go. I mean, we're just going to be locking up everybody. Who among us hasn't made, who in management hasn't made in the end what they would regard was a bad decision upon or exercise the best of judgment? I mean, isn't that every manager on the planet who ever lived at some point in life? So, I mean, if that's really the standard we're going to apply here, we got to build up more prisons. So the that's my whole point. Once you can't, you have to be able to live with that. And so what I was trying to articulate is what's on the other side of that. Because what I said is going to go away with is this, because one of the big commitments of the organizations who do succession planning, and I mean serious succession planning. So that is where you are identifying people in the organization who you're going to spend time and energy over a long period of time.
Yes.
And you want that person to stay with the company because you believe some number of these people are going to be selected for senior level management's people in the role. PepsiCo chooses all of their CEOs internally. PepsiCo hasn't hired an outside CEO forever.
Okay. That perspective. Okay. So they're doing this ahead of time.
So if you're going to do that,
you're
going to make that. That means you're committing to money. You're committing to development. You are committing to keeping that person on the payroll. You are giving them assignments that you're not giving to other people so that they can develop. I mean, this is like a 10, 15, 20-year commitment. And so if that person just leaves the company with all of that development and all the stuff that you spent a ton of money doing, and then they say, see ya, I am now going to parlay everything you did for me into a great opportunity for me elsewhere. And so your sunk costs are now recognized. You are just out all the time and all the money. It's been a slice. See ya.
Yeah.
No company wants that to happen.
Well, no company wants that to happen.
You would like that to happen, but recruiters call people all the time. They try to wean them away and all that other stuff.
Yes.
So one of the common components in these things is they're going to say, look, you're not going to take this someplace else. This is for us. You're going to be here. You're committed. So we are making this investment on the basis and the understanding that we're on the same page. You're here. And just to be clear here, if you try to leave and run someplace else with this stuff, here are all the people you can't work for. Right?
And it makes sense, right? Like it makes sense. And
they also state, if you leave, you kind of got to write us a check because we're out all the money we spent on you, right? Your development, not your pay. Your pay is your pay.
Oh, yeah. The development. The development that they put
we dumped $250,000 into you.
Yes.
So, we'd like that back. So that's referred to as a clawback, right?
Yes. So it is facetious when it's like Jimmy John's, unless.
Well, Jimmy John didn't have those elements in their deal. My point was, both bills stripped all that stuff out. No, you can't do that. And I said, okay, here's the reality of it. If you say to me, if as an employer, I can basically write these insurance policies, because that's what they are. They're insurance policies.
Okay.
The way I see it. So I'm taking out insurance policy and I'm trying to safeguard against my risk of betting on somebody who I believe is going to be here and I want them to be here. And if they run out on me, I want to make that very hard for them to do. I want them to think like 9 times about doing that, because I'm going to have a whole list of people they can't work for, and I'm going to have a big check they got to write. Okay, so that is a strong insurance policy for me that they're going to be here. So if you go to me and say, and because I have that insurance policy, I can now afford to develop a whole bunch of people because I am not going to lose my money. I'm not going to lose my investment.
Okay. I see that side. Yes.
Now, If you say to me, okay, fine, you can't write a single insurance policy. Well, I still need to develop people. Well, I got to hedge my risk now differently. So I have to develop fewer.
Develop fewer people.
See,
and I guess, you know, and
instead of the management development program looking like this for succession planning, because if I could open up the taps, why wouldn't I want my choice of 4 different people for VP of sales? Why wouldn't I want my choice for CEO to be 4 people? Because that's what happens at PepsiCo. PepsiCo ends up every single time with 4 people 100% capable of running PepsiCo. And all PepsiCo's board has to do is pick one of them.
Because PepsiCo has invested those. Okay.
Yes. And then what happens in PepsiCo's case, if those people stayed with PepsiCo for 15, 20 years, because that's usually what happened to get there, because PepsiCo, once people come from the inside, know the business inside out, right? So if when those 4 go up there, if the PepsiCo board says, okay, I'm picking you, the other 3 are then cut loose and released. And if they want to go be CEO someplace else, they can.
Oh, so are they released from that? Okay.
But it's 20 years later. And PepsiCo got what they wanted, was a choice.
And I guess it's really up to those individuals to decide whether they want to give 15, 20
and some will stay.
Some
will stay and some will go. And believe me, their corporate America loves it when PepsiCo announces that a CEO is retiring, because that means 3 companies are likely to have a shot at hiring a great person, because they were developed by one of the best companies on the planet at human capital development.
Okay. So then I see the path that.
So do you see what I'm saying? So if you come to me and you tell me, no, you can't write these insurance policies anymore. Well, the only way to hedge my bet is I'm just going to have to shrink the pool that I develop. And by the way, whose interest does that serve? Doesn't serve mine. And think about all the people who were left out that I could have been left in, because let's face it, the way these development things work, the number of people who want to be CEO and the number who can is a giant difference. And in reality, when you run these plans, and I have, the number of people get so far, and a big number of them say at every different level, you know what, I'm good right here.
Oh, okay.
And that's true too. The next step up, I don't want it. And personally, I think the average person, I think you have to be crackers to be a CEO.
Really?
The average CEO of a public traded company, the average CEO of a public traded company is lasting like 3 to 4 years max.
Okay.
Max. They get fired all the time.
Yeah.
So you get into a high pressure job, you got to turn something around. You have to deliver results right now, or the board's coming down on you. And if the government thinks you did anything halfway wrong, then the SEC is going to come and investigate you. Meanwhile, you got the Wall Street Journal all over your tail, and then you got every Tom, Dick, and Harry on social media screaming about how you aren't doing anything for the stock. I mean,
yes.
No. There's not enough money on the plan to pay me to do that.
Okay, so then I can see how a
non-compete get fired in 4 years. No, pass.
So then I can see how a non-compete in this sort of situation, when we think about PepsiCo and an organization like PepsiCo, we definitely don't want to take away the tool.
If you ask me, did Jimmy John's have any business pushing this down beyond the level of the executive team and maybe some regional VPs and stuff? No, that was dumb.
Yeah, not drivers, right? Because I think it was sent out to the drivers, right? Yeah.
You shouldn't even give it to frontline managers for peace.
Yeah. Like what secrets are they?
What interest? Okay, you have to be able, in Indiana, you have to be able to articulate what your protected interest is.
Yes.
Okay, so let's just be clear. Jimmy John's makes their sandwiches in front of their customers through clear glass. So if there's a trade secret sitting there, pretty much everybody who's ever gone to Jimmy John's has seen it. You see what I mean? So you have to be able to articulate what your protected interest is. From a succession planning standpoint, the protected interest is pretty straight. I got a person who I've sunk a lot of money into, who told me straight up that they wanted to be in this plan. So, I believed them. And so, no, I don't want them wandering off to somebody else and forget the development stuff. I also don't want them wandering off with all the knowledge about this company in their head. And yeah, I can certainly sign them to a non-disclosure agreement, but I'd rather not have them that place in the first place. That's the safest non-disclosure agreement.
Honestly,
you can't work there. So,
it seems like organizations will be smart to make sure that, they're paying that person.
My point is, so
right?
these are the kind of arguments I've been making to say, I am okay if you want to say non-compete agreements are permitted under the following circumstances. I mean, give guidance.
Yes.
Give guidance, right? And they said, one person said to me, well, how about if we just say CEO, VP, stuff like that? I'm like, no, never use titles. Who knows what titles are going to be, right?
Yes.
I say that all the time. In 1992, nobody knew what a webmaster was. And by 1997, if you didn't have one, you were in trouble. So I hate using titles.
Yes.
Stick to what protected interests are. What are the characteristics that satisfy a protected interest? And then let me write a document around that. And any lawyer and quite frankly, skilled HR pro could probably smith something around that, right?
Yes.
So I would like to see something like that. And so far, I am making zero headway. But so the as I said before, we talked about it on the last show. Either one of these bills are going to get out and signed and done with the calendar that's left in the working year. So these are going to have to be reanimated in the next Congress, and who knows? And the focus will be on the legislation, since the Supreme Court has told at least the FTC they can't make the rule. I don't know how the Supreme Court would feel about the Department of Labor making the rule. We'll see. I don't really know where that's going to go, but that's also going to depend a lot on the election.
Right? I mean, it seems like a lot. Yes, it's going to be
a lot's riding on the election. Yeah. So we've talked a lot about this, but
real quick before we jump into the election, I just wanted to see if there was anything else that you could touch on. It was the terms.
It wasn't actually that one. I wanted to actually
the taxes.
I actually want to talk about the Biden administration finalizing the mental health parity rule, because that affects everybody.
Okay.
So basically the mental health parity rule in substance states that employer health plans of all kinds, but employer health, I'm going to talk about us, employers, right?
Okay.
Employer health plans have to be at parity in terms of the dollars and everything else that are allowed on the medical side. So there's got to be parity between those two things. Okay. Now, this is a big deal because this is going to drive costs big time into the renewals for healthcare plans, because they have to be changed to reflect this parity. Okay. And that risk has to be taken into account. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out is one of the big differences between the medical side and the mental side has to do with duration. Okay.
Okay.
Duration. So let me give you an example. So let's use a very common procedure these days. Somebody's got trouble with their arteries, and so the doc says, okay, we're going to put stents in. It's outpatient surgery. You're going to roll in. You'll be here an hour and a half, and you go home when you come out of your general, right? Mm-hmm. And those are performed all the time, okay? If the stent performs as it should, and 99.9% of them do, mm-hmm. you probably got a good 15 to 20 year run before anything else has to be done. Maybe they need to pull those out and put in new ones and this sort of stuff that happens. Once again, that'll be outpatient. Mm-hmm. So you're talking so if you're an underwriter, you're an insurer, and I look at this person, I look at their medical diagnosis, I can say to myself, okay, as long as they're on this health plan, and assuming they're on it for these number of years, we're looking at two separate incidences of outpatient surgery and 4 stents, right? Let's just say I say that. So I can pretty much schedule that, right? In terms of risk. All right. On the mental health parity side, one of the things we know about the mental health side is that generally speaking, people that, and I'm not talking about treatment with pharmaceuticals or anything like that. I'm talking here more along the lines of like therapy and stuff.
Okay. Which is really big right now. Yeah.
Really big. Here's the thing we know about that so far. The large majority of people never get out of it. It doesn't
end. And that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So do you see where I'm going now?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So I'm an insurance underwriter, and you give me this person with arterial sclerosis or whatever, and I have risk data and I have medical data going back decades.
Yes.
That tells me pretty much exactly how this is going to play out.
Yes.
More or less, which means I can then say, okay, here's the dollar risk. I mean, here's the dollars. Here's the potential of that actually occurring. So ergo, here's the premium, right? So it's basically, basically risk time cost equals premium, right? It's pretty straightforward calculation in insurance.
Yes.
So now I go over and I go to the therapy side. Okay, they're this much per session. Okay, cool. Very good. All right, so when does that end? Infinity. Say that again. Infinity. Okay, let me see how much infinity costs.
Oh, okay.
You see where I'm going?
Yes. Yes. So how would they be able to do that then? Like,
well, what they're going to do when they can't plot out when it's going to stop, they're going to jack the rate through the roof. Because you have to protect yourself. Because remember, these people are heavily regulated. Insurance companies are heavily regulated. They have to be reserved to pay claims. Heavily reserved to pay claims. And the government audits them and looks at them all the time. So if you tell me as an insurer, you go to me as an underwriter and you tell me, hey, you got to cover this stuff at parity, and I can't give you an ending point most of the time. Well, I kind of got a reserve for the whole thing every year.
And then how do you even come up with like that number if you don't even?
Well, you have some data. You do have data. It wasn't like we weren't covering mental before. We were. We just weren't doing it at parity. So what they're going to do is look at what was going on before. They have lots of data on that. And then they're just going to jack it up because it has to be at parity now with the medical. So
besides that, what are the other impacts that business owners, or businesses, could face? Like, is that something that's like this fall?
Well, first of all, the expectation is that it will help people, right? So let me make it very clear. I'm not saying it won't help people. What I'm saying is the implications for cost escalations on employer health plans is just buckle up.
So then what about EAP? Because I know that sometimes with EAP, you can have some sort of...
Yeah, this is going to create some challenges for the EAPs because the EAPs really made their hay on zero cost. Now, there were a limit to the number of things you could do at zero, right?
Yes.
But the EAP was low barrier to entry and designed to help people who, by and large, were able to maneuver through life, but were overwhelmed by a series of events that had come crashing in. That's really what the EAP was designed for. The EAP was not designed to take somebody through a decade's worth of mental healing of mental trauma.
Okay, yeah. So they're
not designed for that. That's where the mental stuff is, right? Yes. And the way that was covered before was you were covered up to a dollar limit or a visit limit, and beyond that, you're on the hook for 100%, right?
Yes.
Okay. So that's how everything was being paid for before, mostly out of people's wallets. So we are now going to transfer that cost out of people's wallets, out of the individual beneficiary's wallet, and we're going to throw it onto the whole plan.
Oh.
It will be spread, and now it's going to have to be absorbed, right?
That was a perfect analogy. Take it out of the individual wallet. Yeah, that made it very clear.
When you look at the number one reason why people reported that they were not seeking the mental health care they believed they needed. Okay, we looked at that. What do you think the number one reason? What do you think the number one reason was? Was it cost? Was it time? Or was it finding somebody who could help?
I would say cost and finding somebody who can help.
Now, one of the things that I project will happen is that when you look at the number of therapists and people that are there, okay, who are available. So the kind of equilibrium that had been established was, look, there's so much of the insurance company is going to pay, and then there's what you could pay. And for a lot of these therapists, that would be like maybe one more visit with this person, and then they just don't have the money to pay you. And you can't treat a person that can't pay.
That's right.
Because you got to eat, you got to pay rent, you got to do all this stuff, right? So you can't do that.
And then it'll take a while to get covered under if it's a high.
Well, what I think will happen now with the Parity Act is now that's covered at 100%.
Oh, because it'll probably jack up the price, and now it can be covered.
No, you can number one, you can jack up your price, and number two, hey, no problem with the person staying with you. Somebody else is writing the check.
That's true. That's true.
So
that is so true.
So
how soon could we be like? How soon is this something that could impact?
Well, the rates are going to go up. I think this is going to account for about a 5 to 7% increase lift this year by itself.
This renewal coming up, usually that happens in the fall. So, wow.
Now, insurance companies have known this was coming. They knew this was going to happen. And so this is already baked into
there. Okay.
So I'm not saying that everybody's costs will go up by 5%. Lord knows there's a lot of data that goes into the overall premium lift, right? So I want to be very careful here to say 5% is the additive piece in the overall stuff that's going on. And I would still expect the medical to dwarf it this year, right? Where you're really going to see it is as they start getting data and they start seeing what is the consumer behavior. Now, one of the early constraints, probably for about another 5 or 6 years, one of the chief constraints will be there are not nearly enough providers to meet the demand. But
okay, do you think it's the whole?
If you could become a therapist and you could have guaranteed bank, I mean, you could fill up your book the minute you hung out your shingle because the demand for that is so high.
Really?
I got to think a lot more people would pile into it, but that's a long curve. You just don't go to night school, for a semester and say, I'm that kind of therapist, right?
Yeah, because I think the personality.
That's a lot of education. There's licensing involved and all this stuff. So that's not something that's going to happen right away. Wow, but you have now created an incentive for the demand. Yeah, because now this will create the demand.
Yeah.
So the only thing that has to happen is the supply.
Okay.
Remember, going back to the webmaster thing, right? Nobody knew what a webmaster was, and companies started figuring out, hey, I got to get on this internet thing, or I'm going to left behind. Well, the first people that knew how to do that, because there wasn't enough of them, they were paid outrageous amounts of money. You couldn't touch a webmaster for less than $150,000.
We got to figure out what that is today. Is it an AI person, an AI prompter?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, that's going to be the next thing, right? That's going to be the next thing. And so my point is that by the time 1997 rolled along, all the education had ramped up. Microsoft started doing certificates around that sort of stuff and whatnot. And everybody started piling in because, hey, if I can learn enough to be a webmaster, which, by the way, where the technology was at the time, you could pretty much learn everything you needed to know with an intensive 6-week course. See? Not enough people knew it. And so eventually the supply of people who knew how to do that rose up high enough that the attachment point was on the price and the salary growth stopped.
Yes, because there's a lot
of the early people make out like bandits.
You know what? It
Like
looks
this
like we
happen.
need to figure out.
The people with the early knowledge make out like absolute bandits.
That's what we got to do now, Chris. We've got to
No,
develop a role under AI.
no. But
So
I'm answering your
to
question. I'm trying to answer your question about where the costs are going to go, and so it's going to take a few years for the industry to chew on these things. But
okay.
But anytime you have a hard time assigning your risk, you have to go long on what it is.
So then what can HR professionals do today then? Is there anything that they can do today?
Nothing.
Okay.
You can't do anything. No, the rule's out. The rule's out.
It's
and now
it's in the
hands of the insurance agencies. And so we're going to have to figure out in the coming years how we rationalize all this in plan design.
Okay.
That's the implication. So it's not a this year thing. This year is just flat out comply.
Okay.
And every plan is going to do that. And then in the coming years is when we're going to have to figure out, okay, how do we rationalize all of this? Okay.
So it sounds like getting creative with what that looks like in the workplace, and everybody doing that within their own workplace and seeing how they can really roll out something that supports this benefit. So I know we have about like 10 minutes left. So let's talk about the presidential election, right?
Because so presidential election. So
HR.
So we've been in most of the states are now in early voting. Because I said, you've heard me say we don't have election day anymore. We have election season.
That's
so some states have been at it now for more than a month. But once we roll through the mid of September, probably about 2/3 of the states will be in early voting. And by the time you get to October, everybody will be involved in early voting. The thing about early voting is people have already cast their votes, will have done so before anything else is played out, right? And so that's the hard thing to know, how much of the vote is already in. And you could have something happen that was super dramatic that completely pitched the election one way or the other, but maybe it doesn't go that way because of all the votes that were already cast. So we won't know that, right? So we won't know. So, but nonetheless, and I don't have any numbers yet on the volumes of early voting. I don't know the volume, but the election is moving along apace. The momentum now seems to be on the day-to-day growth, seems to be with Trump, especially in the battleground states.
Okay.
And I've kind of backed into this, not because of the polling, but I'm paying attention to where the campaigns are campaigning.
Okay.
So, as you get in the run up to the election, you should be spending your time where it's going to make an impact, right?
Okay.
So for instance, if I were Kamala Harris's campaign manager, with no more days than we have left, you are not going to New York.
Okay.
You already got it. You're not going to California. You're not going to Oregon. You're not going to Washington. You've already got it. You're not going to, you can go to New Mexico if that's because you're already going to Arizona and Nevada. And I'll let you go to Albuquerque. Okay. But you pretty much have New Mexico. You are not going to Indiana. You're not going to Mississippi, Louisiana, Missouri. I mean, you're just
Iowa, Pennsylvania.
Now, Pennsylvania, you better go to Pennsylvania.
Okay.
You better go to Pennsylvania because my personal projection, this is just me. This is not anybody else. This is just me.
Yes.
If she doesn't win Pennsylvania, I don't think she can win the election.
Oh, okay. So Pennsylvania is that so.
Has to.
Why is Pennsylvania, I know I hear it on the news all the time, Pennsylvania, battle state, but why again?
So Pennsylvania is really, when it comes to voting, it's really like two states. So on the eastern side of the Alleghenies, that's where you got Philadelphia, you got Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, all of these. That has historically been the Democrat stronghold. Okay. And there's a lot of population of Pennsylvania that lives on that side of the Alleghenies, right? Because that's where
side. Okay.
we're settled. Yeah, yeah. And Philadelphia is a massive voting bloc, right, for the
okay.
for the Democrats. But starting with Trump's last election and then bleeding over in the last one, these counties like Lackawanna and Duquesne, they start to become more toss up, right?
Okay.
And so, for instance, the Democrats have more registered voters in Wilkes-Barre, but I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Trump win Wilkes-Barre because the advantage they have isn't that big.
So it's really so close.
Yeah. So
okay.
yeah. So there's parts of that could peel off. Now, if you go to the western side of the Alleghenies, this is what people in Pennsylvania refer to as Pennsyltucky. So the western side of the state is culturally more like Ohio. It's very, very Midwestern, right?
Okay.
So the east side is the oldest part of the state, right? It's the original colony, right, of Pennsylvania there. But because the Alleghenies were a pretty serious barrier, plus the British, it just made it difficult to get over there.
Yes.
And so the people that settled, that big migration that came out of Pennsylvania, that came out of Virginia, that just washed westward, those were a different kind of people. And so that's why, I've always said, if you didn't see the state markers and you just talked to the people or ate the food or saw the churches or whatever the heck it was, I swear, if not for the topography, that's the other thing, the geography would kind of tell you where you were. But culturally, not much of a difference at all between Western Pennsylvania, the whole state of Ohio, the whole state of Indiana, the whole state of Illinois, the whole state of Iowa. You could just go.
Okay, so you're saying like the east side of the Alleghenies is more city life, and
yeah, that's where all the dense population.
Okay, the dense population.
It was the earliest settled piece. So the earlier settlers just kind of crowded there because the Alleghenies are kind of like right on the front porch, right? So that part of the state is Republican as the day is long.
Okay.
Republican.
So Pennsylvania is
long, and a lot of libertarians there too. About 90% of the entire National Guard of Pennsylvania comes out of that region.
Interesting.
To give you an idea, right? So that's where deer. The opening day of deer hunting season in Pennsylvania is a state holiday.
Okay, that says a lot. Okay, yeah.
There you go. So
it does.
Because of that section of the state.
Okay. So wow.
If she can't make some inroads into Pennsyltucky, that means she has to run the table on everything on the east side of the Alleghenies, and that's just going to be hard. So I personally, I would not have her in Pennsyltucky. I would say go to the East Coast and get out the vote. Get out the vote. Get out the vote. Get out the vote. That's what I would do, because you got to have enough of a vote there to overcome the western part of Pennsylvania. If she can win Pennsylvania, she has a shot. So I would go to Pennsylvania. So I have noticed where she's not going.
Okay, where is she not going?
She's not going to Arizona.
Nope. Let me see. Arizona. Okay.
She isn't going to Arizona.
Is there anyone welcoming? Like, is Arizona?
Arizona is right now about +8 Trump.
Okay, because that's what I was thinking. Like, is it like,
So she's not going to Arizona. So I think they have surrendered that.
Okay.
She's not going to Nevada. I think they've surrendered that.
Okay. So now was Arizona if I'm recalling, where it was a woman who she was Republican or either Democrat, but then she ended up being independent.
Okay, so that's
place.
So yes. So Catherine Sinema.
Okay.
Sinema, Democrat, elected Senate, was a centrist Democrat in Arizona, and then for purposes of the primary went far left. And then when she went to Washington, she moved back to the center. which really ticked off the Democrats in the state because they felt like she sold them a bill of goods, because she kind of did. So they ended up kicking her out of the party. She then became, while she was senator, they kicked her out.
That's what I thought. Okay.
So she became an independent and then said she would run as an independent. So there would be a 3-person race. She later decided not to do that. And did not. So the Senate race in Arizona is between Raul Gravilla, and I think I massacred his name, but Raul Gravilla and Carrie Lake.
And I've heard of Carrie Lake. So then I wanted to see if there was like a big independent group there, but no. So it's really more.
Yeah. So that race is there. So that race, the Democrat has the edge in. And so Arizona is a weird state.
Oh, really?
So the states, like I said, it may not be +8, maybe it's +6. I think it's +6. So it's +6 Trump, but then the Democrat senator is up 4.5, I think, on the Republican senator. So that's
kind of, there is a bit mixture.
Who knows how that goes? It could be if Trump takes the state between 6 and 8, it's possible that his coattails drag Lake over the line, but hard to tell, right? Because the McCain machine hates her with the fury of 1,000 suns. So
that's right. Because
they still have a lot of stroke in that state. So no, I expect her. Now, here's the thing that did surprise me. She's been going to Minnesota, and she's been going to Wisconsin and going to Michigan.
So, yes.
If you're in trouble in Minnesota, you shouldn't be.
Why?
You shouldn't be. Democrats win Minnesota. Minnesota was like in the last election for Biden, they were like +15.
Oh, okay. So you think maybe it's just a bit energizing to go where people love you?
Well, no, that tells me it's too tight.
Oh, really? So then Minnesota might be okay. So then they're seeing something.
Yeah. So this is why I'm thinking because she's got to be reacting to the internals. Do you know what I mean when I say internals?
No. What does that mean?
So both parties do internal polling. Okay. So what we see when we see Gallup or somebody else, those are
externals.
Those are external polls.
Yes.
These people do them on their own. Yes, people bankroll those, and yes, a lot of them are push polls and all this other stuff. I won't get into that.
But this is like
parties do their own polling.
Okay.
Parties do their own polling. And so if she's in Minnesota, because her running mate was the former governor of Minnesota, I mean, he should be delivering Minnesota on a platter, right?
So it's interesting.
I mean, Trump Vance. If Vance can't bring Ohio in, what the heck good is it? You know what I mean? But he hadn't.
Okay, but I see what you're saying. Yes.
Ohio was +6 Trump, I think. Ohio. So yeah, it just struck. When I saw those visits to Minnesota, I was like, I don't get it. I mean, I'd be in Pennsylvania. I'd be in Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, Wisconsin is another battleground state she should be going to.
But Minnesota should be in the absolute bag. Michigan should be in the bag.
And it's not,
And they're not. Yeah, I mean, I got to believe in the end.
So then I'm curious. So like since it's still a Democrat, administration, Biden administration. So if Kamala was to win, is there any changes that HR would see?
Well, yeah, because she started to stake out her own territory here. So there are some nuances, right?
Okay.
So she has proposed taxing unrecognized gains for people making $100 million or more, I think is what she said. Or is it $1 million or more?
Okay.
I think it was $1 million or more. If you make $1 million or more, she is proposing taxing unrecognized gains. You know what I mean when I say unrecognized gains?
No, I don't.
Okay. So let me put it in this fashion without you having to reveal too much. So you can just tell me. So how long have you owned your house?
Maybe 10 years.
10 years. Okay. So you know what you paid for it. You know what
yeah.
Okay. So you know what you paid for it. You know what your mortgage is. So in the market in where you live, is your house going for more than you bought it or less?
More.
Bingo. Okay. But you don't have any of that money because you haven't sold it.
That's right.
So your
so it's okay. You have
so your
realized.
asset
Okay.
is worth more.
Uh-huh.
But you haven't recognized it because in order for you to recognize it, you would have to sell it and get the money. Okay.
Really?
Yes, of course.
No. I'm saying really to the unrecognized, because so you don't even have to sell it, but you have to get taxed on it. Oh.
Okay. Now she's saying this will be for people only making $1 million above. So that's her proposal. Now the reason everybody is having kittens about this is because when the U.S. first passed the income tax, because there was no tax, the federal government did not have the authority to tax, right? So when the federal government was given the authority to tax, the tax only applied to like something like the 50 most wealthiest people in the country.
Okay.
Who does the tax apply to today?
To the middle class, right? Like to
everybody.
Everyone. Okay. But okay.
Well, below a certain income threshold, yeah, you're not obligated, but that's a pretty low threshold.
Oh, okay. So of course.
Do you see my point?
Yeah. So this is
why everybody's flipping out. Everybody's flipping out is because all these initiatives have only started out going after a select group of people, and yet somehow over a course of time manages to make its way all the way
to
down.
Everyone else. Yeah.
So
but then it seems like the smartest people know how to get out of it, and the rest of us don't really understand that.
Yes. And so yes. And so she has proposed that. And that's different. The Biden administration has not done that. So I'm just answering your question.
So that's funny because I think you can tell that I didn't understand.
That is something different. Now, Trump has had a proposal come out.
Okay.
Since the last time we talked. Okay. And he wants to not tax overtime pay.
That's right. Now, is that everywhere or is that just New York?
No, Trump has proposed it for the nation.
For the nation, he's saying, do not. We don't want.
He wants no federal tax. See, he didn't say anything about state or local. He can't. He doesn't control those.
That's right. He can't. That's right. Because it's to the states to make that decision.
The states are sovereign. The states are sovereign. Yeah.
And I know that we're going over, but just real quick. No, but it's okay. But what would Indiana say to something like that?
I think we keep on taxing it.
Okay, we'd keep
for two main reasons. Number one, I can't even begin to overstate what kind of nightmare that would be for payroll departments to start out.
Yes, that's right. The administrative portion.
I mean, well, that's true. You could build rules, and ADP would figure out a way to build rules and rights.
Oh, they'd find a way to charge extra too, right? So
they would figure it out. They would figure it out. No, but what I'm saying is that would certainly create issues in payroll, certainly create issues for employers are saying. But I doubt very seriously Indiana would match that.
Okay.
Simply because Indiana works very hard to keep taxes low. And the only way, and you can't do that if you start handing it back.
That's right. If you just keep it low and just keep it consistent.
Especially in a state that has the highest percentage of its adult population in manufacturing than any other state.
Which
state? Huh?
Which state did you say it has?
Indiana.
We have the most adults in manufacturing.
As a percentage of the adult population.
Oh, as a
compared to any other state. Okay. Yeah, because lots of other states are bigger.
Okay.
Right? Okay. So as a percentage of the adult population, we have more of that committed to manufacturing than any other state in the country. So that gives you an idea of how much of our population is hourly.
Quite a bit, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So if the state were populated overwhelmingly by white collar, like let's say Connecticut,
they wouldn't have to worry about the overtime because that is okay.
Doesn't mean anything.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So it would.
Yeah, really if I were the state of Indiana and somebody proposed that to me, I was like, do you know how much revenue we would be giving up
Okay. Oh, wow. See, yeah, because definitely not, maybe.
No, that goes right to the income tax that they collect, right? So,
Yes.
so those are two things that have happened, right? But I think that what you will see, well, I kind of seriously doubt there will be another debate.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know when you shoehorn it in, and I don't know if you saw the viewership on the last debate, but like nobody watched.
Oh, really?
It was low.
Because I heard people say that they couldn't watch it and they turned it off or
Well,
something.
I tell you, if they did do a debate, if they did a debate, I know where they could do it, and they would just crush it. I mean, they would do
Where?
15, 20 million easy.
Where?
Twitter.
Oh, you know what? I
If
haven't jumped on
they
the
did that
Twitter.
on Twitter, if they did it on Twitter, and they had
Really?
moderators that were independent journalists, like maybe Matt Taibbi from the left, maybe get Cheryl Atkinson, old news person. Hell, I'd put Joe Rogan in there and let them ask the questions. I bet you that they would melt Elon Musk's servers.
Really? So why Twitter? I mean, now I'm curious. So why Twitter over like the other platforms? Like, why would Twitter over YouTube, for example? I guess I haven't jumped on
because
Twitter.
because they get the most eyeballs.
Oh, Twitter gets the most eyeballs, huh?
Get the most eyeballs. When Elon Musk interviewed Trump,
See, I didn't.
that was 18 million live, and then about another 32 million, or no, 100, well, I think it was 130 million by the time it was done. 130 million downloads globally.
Really? Yeah, I just saw the memes about it. I didn't watch the actual,
Yeah, no, the numbers on social media dwarf anything that the major networks can do. I mean, the viewing habits have shifted.
Well, yes, because it is on social media. Like, I know this is so totally unrelated, but I'm thinking about like, I don't even know if you know Kevin Hart and Kai Cenat.
I'm very familiar with Kevin Hart. Yeah.
Okay, so then he did like, him and Kai Cenat, I think it's like a Twitch social media influencer.
Yeah.
And they had so many views on Twitch.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh my gosh, like it really does seem like social media is a way to go. But okay.
It is. So I think if they did a debate there, I think a ton of people would watch, but I don't see
that would be fun to like live
with no more time than is left. Right. I mean, we've only got a handful of days left in September, and it's really going to move to get out the vote focus really soon. So now Trump, the dude just loves his stadium shows. He just loves them. He gets his own energy comes from crowds, right? I mean, I think that's why he does it. I mean,
he's
I think
extrovert. Yes, he's an extrovert.
But I think I think it actually energizes him. I mean, I think this is one thing that keeps him going. I think given the second assassination attempt, I'm kind of wondering if the Secret Service will ever let him be outside again between now and the election. So
it's crazy.
Yeah, and so that and that second attempt, the media isn't talking about it very much at all, but I can tell you that for a lot of people that are like independents or people that are sitting on the fence, and not necessarily on the fence, but still working through it, I should say. I think for a lot of independents, I think a lot of people would have preferred different choices for this election. I think I'm not on shaky ground saying that. But the choices we have are the choices we have, and so it's binary.
Yeah.
So it's binary, and you got to pick one, right? That's all there is to it. And I think for some subset of folks, given that this is the second attempt, I halfway wonder, how does that affect their analysis of this, right? Do you go the way of saying, well, that just proves you know, how beyond the pale this guy is to certain people, or do you say, wow, is he really the one that's going to bring the change I'm after? Because it sure seems like they're trying hard to kill him. You know what I mean? I don't know which way that falls.
Yeah, because I would say I'm one of those people, right, that are just kind of like.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, and it just really just
was crackers enough. I mean, we haven't had
this
assassination attempt.
I've never seen anything like this, honestly. You
well,
know,
not since really Bobby Kennedy. I mean, Reagan was president when he was shot, so.
And I saw that in like, because I think I was a little kid, yeah. So I saw that on the news. Like,
yeah, I was living in DC when that happened.
Really?
That was like the local news right away. But I mean, we haven't seen it. It was so jarring, and everything around it was just so bizarre. The guy climbing up on the roof and getting within the perimeter and a clear line of shot, and
that's why it's just all weird.
Everything about it was just super bizarre, and we still don't know what exactly happened because
it doesn't really seem like there was media coverage, and I think that's what really boggles my mind.
There was a lot, and then it went away, and then I really
quickly overnight.
I really compare that with this one. This one went away almost the same day it happened. So.
Which is really weird to me. Why is it going away so quickly? It seems like our media milks something.
I don't really want to opine on that. And anyway,
okay.
Yeah, we're far off the topic we were talking about. All I was basically saying is that the key takeaway in this is both candidates are occasionally talking about stuff that does affect HR and is in that neighborhood.
Yes.
So we got to do that. So anyway, I got to bounce.
Yes.
For another meeting. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chris, for joining, for the show today. And then thank you all for watching. Then join us next time. Until then, bye, Chris.
Great.
All right.
Bye.